Anthony Pompliano, better known as Pomp, thanks so much for coming on the Disruptive Warrior.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so give us just a quick bio and maybe end with how you got to Bitcoin.
Yeah. Anthony Pompliano, most people call me Pomp. I've done a whole bunch of stuff. Was in the military for a while, then built a couple companies, worked at Facebook, ran some product and growth teams there. I've been investing full-time since 2016. I think I've invested like 120, 130 million bucks into early stage companies. And some of those I was fortunate enough to be a seed investor. They become worth over $1 billion today. And spend most of my time focused on kind of Bitcoin infrastructure, decentralization technologies, privacy-centric technologies, kind of everything in and around that space.
Yeah, so how did you get to Bitcoin? Was it you ended in Facebook and in San Francisco? Is that kind of where you maybe jumped into it?
That's the first time I ever heard about it. I think it was like 2014 or beginning of 15, and did absolutely nothing. Didn't even Google it, which is pretty stupid of me. But then towards I think like middle or end of 2016, somebody sat me down and explained mining, and my eyes lit up because that was basically just a data center on steroids in a much better way. And so from there, I really started to kind of pay attention. I bought some mining rigs. All of a sudden, it was actually Ether at the time that I was mining with GPU rigs. That started to show up. The price went up. I just, kind of went down the rabbit hole and very quickly realized like, hey, this is going to be something that is incredibly valuable in the future and very disruptive. And so I should go spend a lot of time focused on it.
Yeah, as an investor, you're always looking for asymmetry, right? Particularly when it comes to tech. What were some of the key metrics or factors that you saw in Bitcoin or Ethereum that gave you the strong conviction that this is going to be something that's going to 10x or disrupt a lot of ecosystems within the tech space?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was just you're always looking for something that is completely outside of the frameworks that people are using in an industry. And so it's non-consensus. And if you're right with the non-consensus, there's massive asymmetry and disruption. And so there's nothing more non-consensus than literally a deflationary kind of decentralized digital currency becoming the global reserve currency. Like the probability of that happening, especially years ago, but even today is less than 5%. And so when you say, hey, the probability is low, but the potential value creation, if this was to occur, is literally off the charts. I mean, you're talking about the best performing asset of the last decade and would be for the coming decades as well. And so it was just like the perfect type of asymmetric kind of disruptive bet that I looked for. And so I really spent a bunch of time getting educated on it and kind of staking not only my financial capital, the LP's financial capital, but also kind of my social capital, my personal reputation on it as well. And we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, putting your social capital, a lot of people come to Bitcoin because of the promise of returns. I came in 2017, I was playing in San Francisco and everyone was talking about it. But I think a lot of people stay kind of for the sovereignty and the disruptive and the ability to give agency to a lot of individuals. Could you talk a bit about that? I think obviously financial health and the ability to be financially healthy gives you some sovereignty, but can you speak to maybe some of the technological benefits of Bitcoin that make it unique in terms of scaling sovereignty globally?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that any time that you can basically create a system that no single individual or organization controls, that is a really interesting thing that you've got to pay attention to. And so ultimately, we've talked about this from, maybe somebody can create a product, maybe somebody can create a network, maybe somebody can create, a single asset, but no one had ever really thought about it from like, what would a decentralized currency look like? And I think that's kind of the key piece is you basically take this really disruptive idea of decentralization, and then you layer it in with the really disruptive kind of largest, asset anyone could think of, right, is a single asset being the actual money supply. And so for me, the sovereignty, the decentralization, the kind of privacy centric or pseudonymous type approach, just the ethos of Bitcoin and really the crypto industry in general is super attractive to me, because what it ultimately does is it does two things. It, one, uses technology to strip power away from those that abuse it. And two, is it levels the playing field for every citizen, regardless of where you're born, what language you speak what your financial situation is. And so whenever you can get a piece of technology that can basically attack in both directions, right? It can take away power from those that are powerful, and it can give power to those that lack power. I think that you really set yourself up for something that can accrue, way more value than people originally think. So I continue to say that Bitcoin's a perfect example. Like, we are probably all, including myself, you, and everybody else, we are all underestimating the potential of this thing. And so it'll be fun to kind of watch it play out over the next, 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah, you spent time in the military. I've been a professional athlete, both domains where you need a hierarchy, right? It just allows things to function. How would you take decentralization and put it to a team context, whether it's a military team, a professional team, and scale it for performance? For example, in sports, if you have two superstars, particularly in bigger amount of players on the field, whether it's soccer or football, two stars doesn't necessarily translate to success. Really, basketball's five, so LeBron James has a bigger impact. How do you scale that in terms of decentralization, and what are some of the maybe psychological factors or the team chemistry factors that you've been able to see from a decentralization standpoint that you find attractive?
Yeah, so two stars should lead to success. The problem is that we're talking about humans, and there's all sorts of humans issues, everything from egos to greed to selfishness, all the way on down, right? Just poor decision making, whatever. The beauty of this is when you're dealing with machines, you can program the machines to do exactly what you want them to do, and they do that forever. And so what you end up finding is, imagine if you had a team of 11 stars, and all 11 stars did exactly what the coach wanted them to do at all times. Like, you probably be pretty good. You probably would win all the games, right? And so there's a kind of correlation to the Bitcoin network. Is basically every computer is programmed in a way to run software, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And that system now is the strongest computer network in the world, and it is resistant to every attack from any individual, organization, nation state, all the way on up. And so I think that what we're watching happen is a beautifully designed system, but also a perfectly executed system as well. And so usually what happens, if you go back to the sports analogy, in football, every offensive play is drawn up to be a touchdown. Literally every play. Like, there's no coach who's like draws up a play and is like, oh, this one's not going to be a touchdown. But what ends up happening is one of the 11 players on the field messes something up, or the defense does something that's unexpected, and like there ends up not being a touchdown every play. And so I think that what you've got to remember is, again, it's all human based. When you go to a machine based network, you can really design it in a way where it does exactly what you want it to do. And that's where you can kind of get that beautiful and perfect design of Bitcoin.
Yeah, what would you say to critics who say, yeah, it's very well designed, but how would you improve it over time as humans get more technologically sophisticated? Does it have any code or any backdoors built in such that we could iterate and improve with more of a global adoption?
Yeah, I don't think that there's like code, backdoors or anything that would be detrimental to it. I think that what you get is you get a natural kind of upgrading of the software, right? And so what we find is the market, right, or the network has to adopt those upgrades, and generally they do. And so what you end up getting is you get a continued improvement in security, in efficiency, all kinds of different things. And then there's people who are building on top of the network, and so this is everything from layer two, kind of super technical improvements, all the way to just user experience improvements that are built on top of the Bitcoin network. And so you're going to consistently get improvement, but what you're not going to do is you're not going to change some of the core functionality or kind of rules of the Bitcoin system without having 51+% of people agree. And given how big and decentralized and distributed it is at this point, I just don't see that those kind of core functions or rules are going to change.
Yeah, you're famous, and as you said, you put your social capital on the line for Bitcoin. Obviously, there's a huge debate in the DeFi community about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Why are you so bullish on Bitcoin versus Ethereum? Wouldn't, like, for example, US currency basically runs in tandem with oil, right? It's the petrodollar. Why would you not have a similar approach if Bitcoin becomes digital gold, Ethereum is the digital Wall Street or the gas that allows you to transact and send gold back and forth? Why would you not see those two as mutually reinforcing and, yeah, both very attractive assets? And why focus so much on just one specific of those two?
Yeah. So I've said a couple of times now that, like, it's all the same thing from a philosophy standpoint. The execution is where we disagree, right? So first, decentralization is kind of the philosophy, and I completely agree with that, right? And I think that the first thing we have to recognize is that Bitcoin was the start of decentralized finance, right? DeFi started with Bitcoin as decentralized money as the core foundation of the whole thing. I also agree that the infrastructure around Bitcoin today is centralized for the most part, right? When you look at exchanges, you look at wallet providers, you kind of look at all of the services and products around Bitcoin, it's all centralized. And so the thing that the Ethereum community says is, hey, we want to accelerate the ability to build decentralized infrastructure. So they created Ethereum, the network, and they've gone off and they've built a lot of that. I actually think a lot of those ideas are right. The part where I disagree with is that using Ether as the core monetary asset is going to not be a sustainable approach. And so what I ultimately think, I have this framework where I say, look, Bitcoin is digital sound money, and then it has centralized infrastructure around it. On the other side of the equation, you have fiat-like money, right? Or a currency in Ether, right? There's no hard cap. It can be changed, increased or decreased based on security requirements that are determined by people. And so it's just like fiat. And then you have decentralized infrastructure around it. And so what you're going to get is you're going to get the sound money with the decentralized infrastructure. Those things are going to come together. Now, the big debate, I think, is less about like, is DeFi a thing? Is Bitcoin a thing? Whatever. It's more so just how do you bring them together? So are we going to take Bitcoin and do like something like wrapped BTC and then bring that to the kind of decentralized infrastructure on Ethereum? There's people trying that. Or are you going to do the opposite? Are you going to bring decentralized infrastructure around Bitcoin? My bet is that the sustainable kind of long-term value is going to accrue in taking Bitcoin as the core sound money monetary asset, building up additional layers to increase the the usage of it, the transaction speed, the dropping of the cost, all these things around like the Lightning Network, Liquid, etc., and then building decentralized infrastructure around all of that. And so that's a very, very long-term view. And ultimately, the one thing I constantly go back to is the one mistake that I think a lot of the current iterations of DeFi is making in the Ethereum world is they are not benefiting from organic technology adoption. What they're doing is they're simply trying to use financial incentives. They're literally creating some sort of manipulative financial incentive to try to accelerate adoption. And so what that basically looks like is it'll say something like this. I've created this decentralized product or service. I'm going to create a bunch of tokens. And then if you come in, right, Andrew, and you basically start to use my product, I'm going to give you more and more of the tokens. And so that kind of yield farming or that financial incentive, what it does is it helps to very quickly bootstrap a network. Right? It's like, oh, let's all go and do this because there's a great financial return. Well, the problem is that it's unsustainable at that rate of return forever. And so there's a commoditization or degradation of the financial return. And so then what you do as a user is you start using product A, that's a great financial return, you're farming that yield. And then all of a sudden, as it starts to degrade away, somebody else shows up with a different product and they say, hey, I've got a better return. And so you abandon product A and you go to product B. And so if you look, most of the DeFi products, now this isn't true for all of them, but for most of them, there've been these massive influx of users and then people move on to the next thing. If you go back and you look at the Bitcoin network, what happened was there was none of that. Right? The closest thing would have been the Bitcoin reward, which was for miners. And that basically was always held to a very kind of consistent thing from day one. And so it took 10 to 12 years to get to the point where we're at, right? It took like 12 years. Like that is a natural cycle of technology adoption. And so I always think that the organic growth is going to be more sustainable than what I would consider the equivalent of paid growth, right? Basically what the DeFi system is doing is using paid acquisition. And so what we know from the legacy technology world is paid acquisition works as long as you're still paying. But when you shut off paid, the growth goes away. And so you need organic. And so, yes, you can potentially use paid acquisition to jumpstart a flywheel and then get organic growth. But if you never get the organic growth, it's going to be unsustainable. And so that's why I basically say, like, look, you need to focus on where the organic growth is. And that organic growth is in that Bitcoin as a monetary asset. And I think you're going to get the decentralized infrastructure built around that. The question I don't have the answer to is, are we going to see the teams building on Ethereum today say, hey, look, I'm going to actually go build this on the Bitcoin ecosystem? Or do you need new teams to go build it, right? we've seen a couple of people say, hey, Ethereum, no more. I'm going to go build on Bitcoin, but it's, 1% maybe of all the developers. And so it's just not that big of a shift. But there are a lot of companies now that are starting to build in the Bitcoin ecosystem, some of this decentralized infrastructure. And so we'll see what it plays out. Like, ultimately, my opinion doesn't matter. The market will decide. But I think that's kind of how I look at the difference between the two and why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin versus maybe some of the stuff going on elsewhere.
Yeah, you bring up a couple interesting points. I'm bullish myself on ICOs for creators for that reason, that if you're a creator, you could ICO and tokenize yourself, and you could take a technological venture in a way that you probably wouldn't otherwise if you didn't have that initial seed capital via an ICO, right? Do you think creators, as they come more and more online with more autonomous jobs, putting people out of work, and creative work being a solution to that, do you see ICOs as a way of bootstrapping that capability? And do you think that could occur on the Bitcoin network rather than a Waves or an Ethereum network as currently is?
I haven't done enough work on the nuances of the tokens and ICOs, and I've had a couple of people explain it to me, so I generally know kind of how it works. The big thing that I always say to people though is you just can't cheat. You can't short circuit organic growth. And what that means is that, if you look at, let's say, a lot of the stuff that I've done, I've got 120,000 people on an email list. That literally took from 2018, May, I think it was 7th, 2018 until today. So we're talking about over 3 years of building this thing. And I don't think that there's anything I could do to get the open rate, to get the click-through rate, the engagement, the thoughtfulness of the readers, all that kind of stuff that would have been done in a shorter period of time. Like, it just takes time. And so again, it's the difference between, could I have gone and run a bunch of Facebook ads and gotten people to all go and sign up for the newsletter? Sure. But there wouldn't have been the same level of engagement and loyalty and all of that there is today. And so it's kind of, do you want to short circuit organic growth? And do you think that that is going to lead to some sort of sustainable kind of retention? We better have really, really strong product market fit, or you've got to have organic growth. And so when it comes to creators, I think it's really hard to take an Instagram account. If I sit and I post on Instagram every day and I build an organic audience, and you go run a bunch of Facebook and Google ads and you build up an audience because you ran ads, who's going to have a better audience 5 years from now? Well, we don't know for sure, but if I had to bet on one or the other, I would bet on the organic growth, just because that is what is going to have built up over time. People are going to have to opt in every day to not unfollowing you, all that kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens with kind of the tokens around creators. What's more interesting to me is not how do I bootstrap my audience, but is there a way to basically create a system where creators can monetize the content they're creating and kind of the skills they have without having to rely on advertising? That seems to me oh, you already have the audience, you already built up all the organic growth, they're not going to go anywhere. Or there are things you can do there. That's a little bit different, I think, than trying to basically use tokens or something to bootstrap a network.
Yeah, I guess what's exciting to me is that if you use your newsletter example, if you were struggling to pay bills, et cetera, if you did an ICO with your token, you'd be more likely to pursue that venture. You'd have capital to pay your bills while you sent and organically built your newsletter. So I agree that it takes time and you have to put in the time and the others. That's the only way to get organic growth. But what's exciting and novel about an ICO is it puts that capital up front, and it gives skin in the game to your initial stakeholders and community holders, right? You want an audience, you want to build a community, and the more ways you can get those stakeholders involved, I think, is exciting, and will lead to more and more people taking more creative approaches and pursuing creative ventures that they probably wouldn't otherwise. So yeah, I guess I'm super excited a bit about that.
Well, one thing I'll just say with that, right, is I don't necessarily disagree that that's the right way to think about it. What I will say, though, is it's high risk, high reward. Because basically the people that you bring in that have a financial upside, they have a very, very different kind of mentality with the content and with you versus, let's say, somebody who first subscribed to the email that I had. And not only did they get no financial benefit from it, they actually paid me for it.
Right.
right? Like,
Mhm.
like that's a very, very different thing. And so I think that you've just got to be careful in that situation, that if there's some sort of token that bootstraps something, like what happens if all of a sudden somebody else comes along and they say, oh, screw this guy. Like I want the next, guy or girl that I'm going to go follow, and they're going to have bigger upside and, yada, you whatever. You
Mhm.
just get into that kind of lack of loyalty and unsustainability to a system. So as with many things, big risk, big reward. I think that people will kind of figure it out though.
Yeah, ultimately, people are going to respond to what provides value to them, right? The market dictates where the value goes, and as a creator, your job should be just to provide as much value as possible. What's really interesting to me is to think in a broader context, zoomed out, is the internet is still relatively early, and the way people are interacting on the internet is still relatively early over a long enough time span. What do you think are some of these emergent properties that we're going to see as more and more people come online, more and more people make a living online, and more people create online? Do you have a thesis as to what are some emergent properties of all these interactions compounding and growing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the key piece to all of this is just we're going to get a decentralized digital automated system, right?
Hmm.
And what that basically means is you as an individual are going to be able to, with an internet connection, make a living and keep a living, right? And I keep talking about this from the sense of making a living with an internet connection that has nothing to do with crypto for the most part, right? I
Hmm.
mean, literally, we're seeing it where if you have skills and you've got an internet connection, you can get a job. Whether it's freelance, part time, full time, whatever. Same can be said about in this now like kind of financial world, is if you have assets, you can drive yield, you can make a return, you can hold an asset and it can go up in value. Like all that kind of stuff is now coming, but it's breaking down the barriers, is breaking down the friction. And so now with an internet connection, you have kind of the true promise of the open internet and this open financial system. And then last thing I think is you can keep a living. And what that means is rather than having to basically become a professional investor with the money that you do make, now you can simply use a savings technology like Bitcoin and simply save your assets, and you will accrue value over a long period of time. And so I think that that's a really beneficial thing. And so ultimately, what I'm really excited about is empowering anyone in the world with an internet connection to do whatever they want. Right. If you're outside the United States in a developing country and you want to improve your life or your family's life, you should only need an internet connection. As long as you have that, and I don't care if it's on a phone, on a computer, in the local internet cafe, at a school, wherever it is, if you have an internet connection, now you can improve your life. And I think that that is such a fundamentally powerful idea. It's such a paradigm shift. Anyone who's able to help empower that reality will end up accruing a lot of value on the internet.
Yeah, again, it's a push to increase sovereignty. Would your thesis be then that you're seeing it already, people remove more and more remote work, but does that mean that head of households or people are basically in business for themselves versus joining major companies or consulting? Are they going to try to, yeah, if they can if they can accrue more of the sovereignty and more of the gains to themselves as an individual, would that be your thesis as the trend that things are moving?
Well, remember, right, is as you kind of think about this, if you have a skill, you
Hmm.
may be able to work two jobs, three
Hmm.
jobs, but it's internet jobs. And so you work 8 hours a day, but you get three jobs done, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe you do part time work. Or maybe what you say is, hey, you used to pay as a business somebody who lived in an American city. I don't live in an American city. I literally will be rich in my country if you pay me 50% less than what you were paying that person in an American city. And so you get kind of more of a free market dynamic, both on the employer and on the employee side. And so ultimately, what it does is it leads to a much more kind of meritocracy of ideas, which I think is important, and much more free market, which I think is important. And also, I think that what it does is it allows now for a greater movement both being between industries, between companies, and between actual jobs themselves or roles inside of a job. And so when you talk about in between industries, like I literally today, if I say, hey, I've got 4 weeks, I want to go switch industries, I can go on the internet and learn whatever the skill set is I need. Right.
Hmm.
And, maybe it takes longer than 4 weeks or shorter than 4 weeks, whatever, but like I can use YouTube and websites and I can learn a new skill and then go apply it and get a job. The
Hmm.
second thing is once I'm inside an industry, if I'm working for X company company. Well, now all of a sudden the switching cost to move to Y company is not that high. It's actually lower, right? I don't feel like I've got all of the things that are holding me down, whether it's geography or pay or whatever. And so I think that you're just going to constantly see, as friction goes down, competition goes up. And as competition goes up, that free market dynamic takes over, and it really kind of forces people to focus on, why am I the best? Why am I the best employer? Why am I the best employee? And so that's a really, really powerful kind of paradigm shift that's going to occur. Again, it goes back to, you just need an internet connection.
Yeah, I think it forces everyone to level up and to compound their skill set. You could see a lot of employers just saying, here's the job, here's the rate. If you can do it, apply. And then you can do it, you don't. If you can't, and you could, like you say, you have an 8-hour work day. If you have the skill set to get that done and you like the rate, you do that, you do this, you could have huge days, small days, all sorts of things. That would be my thesis, is everything's just contract work. Here's the rate. Everybody bids to do it. If you have the skill set, you get it done. Yeah, that's super exciting. To me, I'm curious. Yeah, if automation really catches on and cuts through industries, what do you think are maybe 5 careers that really launch, that maybe wouldn't otherwise? I really think people are gonna. The natural impulse is people want to do more creative work if their bills are covered and they have access to everything they need. What are maybe 5 jobs that you see really
Yeah.
taking advantage of decentralization?
So I don't know if I necessarily have like individual jobs as much as just kind of trends that I would pay attention to, right? So obviously one is if you've got any sort of technical skill, whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, computer vision, just software code in general, anything in that, kind of bucket of technical work, I think will be very, very valuable in the future, right? It's kind of if the machines run the world and you can talk to machines and make machines listen, like you're going to be pretty valuable. The second thing that I think is going to be really important actually is people who can drastically reduce the complexity of physical space. And so if you think about everything from micro homes to mobility to commercial space to new types of cities, like all of this stuff is going to be really, really valuable, and I think will be very interesting. The third thing that I think is kind of creative work for sure, whether it's podcasts, it's writing, it's video, it's, whatever. And that's both the talent and also kind of the execution behind the talent. So if you're a video editor, if you're an audio editor, if you're a ghostwriter, literally if you're a ghost tweeter, like all that kind of stuff will become really, really valuable for folks. And then I think that the fourth trend that I think will become, again, more important, but it's already important, people just don't think about it, is capital allocation, right? And so if you think of capital allocation, really what we've historically had is a bunch of capital allocators who have been using the same vehicles and the same assets and the same industries for the last 30 years. Well, there's a whole new set of this stuff. And so the people who understand the new world and the new paradigm are going to end up actually being way ahead of the old capital allocators. And so I think there's a whole new world, and those that are at the forefront of it are really, really, really going to win. And so those are 4, just top of mind trends that I would pay attention to. And if you're in one of those 4 buckets, I always say, like, the beauty of making yourself look like you're a genius is you just got to get long in the right market. And I think that those 4, if you're in any of those 4, you're going to do just fine.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the way tech is really eating almost every industry. You can see like long tech, short bureaucracy. Why do you think, is it just the powerful nature of tech? It just completely changes what skill sets are required, access to the skill set. Like you said, if you can talk to machines, you don't need a Ivy League degree, you don't need an insane amount of capital. You just need to program the machines toward a specific aim. What drove you to San Francisco and big tech, and what were some of the key lessons that you kind of learned that they're doing differently that maybe East Coast investment banking hasn't really adopted, or even like a political career? What are some of the things that they really prioritize, a mental model that the rest of the world hasn't caught up to?
I don't even know if it's like some secret sauce. It's just the fact that they do it and other people don't. But it's critical thinking skills, it's first principles thinking, it's independent thought, it's iteration, and it's the kind of comfort in being okay with being wrong in public. And so, when you celebritize success to the point that failure is outlawed, you end up getting in a really, really bad environment. And so if you really want an innovative environment, you have to celebrate not only success, but you actually have to celebrate shots on goal as well. And I think that Silicon Valley has done a great job of that. Independent thought, no brainer, kind of just critical thinking and problem solving skills is, if you talk to any great operator, that's ultimately what they are. They're a problem solver, right? When something comes up, they work with their team to solve the problem. And so it's very, very little of a problem pops up and, oh my God, Andrew's, it's his fault, or hey, Sally, it's your fault. Like, those companies just don't work. They don't succeed. And so I think that when you get into kind of the more technical environments, like we used to have this saying at Facebook, like, code wins arguments. Like, everyone shut up. Like, the code is going to win. Either it works or it doesn't work. Either the market adopts or the market doesn't. And so I think that there's this just rooting in that independent thought and kind of source truth that makes them just much more fanatical on data and information. Whereas other people, there's a lot of value in having your name on the door and the big mahogany desk and saying, I went to Harvard, and being able to, kind of hide behind all of that as a reason why your idea is the best idea when, actually it's not.
Yeah.
Do you like my Harvard impression?
I did. Yeah. I've never heard it pronounced that way, but yeah, it was.
You never heard it say, I'm a Harvard man?
I've never with that inflection, but yeah, I've heard it. Yeah, I have to ask: are you doing OPSEC from Balaji? Is that why everything's covered the way you have it, or is that just chance?
No, I'm literally in an Airbnb. There's a metal table here. I don't know where the hell Polina booked us, but I'm in an Airbnb that looks kind of like a hotel room. And if I open that up, the light is too bright. So
right. Oh, okay, I didn't know if it was intentional.
Unlike Balaji, I'm not smart enough to have the level of OPSEC that he has. So I just follow his lead, and when he says something, I just say that's a good idea. I'll do whatever he does.
That's good advice. Just do exactly what he says.
What's the saying? Have you heard the saying on Twitter? I forget who said it, but somebody said the scariest words in the English language right now are Balaji was right, because every time he predicts something's going to happen, it happens, and then everyone's like, oh damn.
Yeah, he's way ahead of every curve, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you said the Harvard thing. Christine Lagarde just came out and said that a majority of criminals are using Bitcoin, which it seems like such a crazy argument to say that because criminals use it, therefore it's bad, as if they don't use cash. But what are some of these things that you found that consistently people who are in centralized positions of powers, whether it's institutions or big governments, use as a tactic to try to stop decentralization, in this case to target Bitcoin? And why do you think it's effective? Do people still buy into this, or is it just this is their last playbook, basically? It seems like such a crazy argument to even
0.4% of all Bitcoin transactions are used for illicit purposes.
Mm-hmm.
$2 trillion was laundered through the global financial system last year.
Right.
$2 trillion. That's 2x the size of the entire crypto market was laundered in the legacy financial system. The greatest perpetrators of that money laundering were the big banks. The big banks launder more money than the entire size of the crypto industry. And yet the entire crypto industry, just Bitcoin alone, 0.4% is for illicit purposes. And so this whole idea that using a transparent digital public ledger is going to be bad for the global economy and good for criminals is laughable. And these people know that. They obviously know that. And so what ends up happening here is people just don't do the work. Like, if you sat down and had Christine Lagarde, right? And I've never met her. I have no judgment on her as an individual person, but just given what I've seen publicly, and asked her to explain Bitcoin, I don't think she could.
Right.
I don't think that she could have a nuanced conversation about it. By the way, it's so small today that maybe it's actually okay that she can't. Like that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing that she can't do it. She runs the ECB. Like, she should be focused on like way bigger things than Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin gets big enough, then she's going to have to be educated on it. Right. And so it's always like kind of one of these things where it's so easy to take pot shots at people on Twitter and like in the public. But like, if I'm Christine Lagarde, Bitcoin is the farthest thing from what I'm worried about. Like, there's a global pandemic, there's government, shutdowns. I've got millions of people who are unemployed. Like, I got a lot of problems I got to deal with. Bitcoin, you guys want to go buy and sell, internet magic money? Like, knock yourselves out. I don't care about that. I'm not spending any time learning about it. And so, of course, when you're uneducated about something and somebody asks you, you feel like you need to have an answer. And so my guess is that some staff member somewhere gave a couple talking points that, hey, it's used for illegal things. Cool. Okay. Well, let's just say that. And so I tend to just discount a lot of what's kind of said publicly until you know somebody's done the work. And then as we know, when people do the work, like, oh, wait, maybe this thing is actually pretty valuable and like we should embrace it rather than, kind of spew all this nonsense about it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it would be better if it was some sinister ploy to really kill Bitcoin because they were terrified of it. But I think you're right; it's not even in their wheelhouse of things to try
They
to
can't
solve.
kill it. They
Yeah.
can't kill it. They can drastically hurt adoption. They can do all this kind of stuff. But I wrote about it this morning. In Pakistan, it's illegal to buy, sell, or mine Bitcoin. It's illegal. Adoption is accelerating though. Laws don't matter if they can't enforce them. And that doesn't mean that they can't enforce laws in the Bitcoin world, right? There's regulated businesses, there's taxation on Bitcoin. Like they can absolutely enforce on some aspects of it. But if you outright ban ownership and you say you can't buy, sell, or mine Bitcoin, and somehow adoption in your country is still going up, well, that means there's a disconnect between the law you're creating and the enforcement ability that you have. And so I think that what was so fascinating about Pakistan as an example is one of the 4 provinces in Pakistan finally capitulated, and now they're going to take government money and they're going to mine Bitcoin.
Right.
And so it's like at a, kind of the equivalent of a national or federal level, it's illegal, but one of 4 provinces now is going to say, maybe we should be mining this. Like, maybe we should participate. And so eventually, like my guess is that Pakistan is going to embrace Bitcoin.
Right.
Right. And so like every country is going to go through the same thing. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. I guess I'll leave it there and transition, but yeah, I'll just jump in. So I also am very curious why companies like a Coinbase, and you saw the Winklevi with Gemini considering IPOing, why wouldn't they ICO as a proof of concept? Like the whole point is this doesn't work for everyone. IPO is an old, outdated concept. Why wouldn't they ICO as proof of concept to kind of push the industry forward? It's just they did the risk. They want their payday. Is that simple?
You ready?
Yeah.
How confident are you that it would work?
An ICO or an IPO?
Yeah, like just digitizing their equity. Would you bet $1 billion on it that it would work? Would you bet 10 billion? How about 50 billion? Because that's what they're likely to go public. Like in the public markets, they're gonna be worth over 50 billion is my guess. I don't know for sure, but that's my guess.
Sure.
So would you bet $50 billion that it's better to go through a ICO or some equivalent than to go public on the stock exchange?
No, but I would do a portion of it. I wouldn't do all of it. I would do 10%, or particularly once you have your estimates, I would definitely do a portion of it, right?
But what's the point of doing a portion of it? Like either because you can't trade, you can't like split and say, hey, I'm going to list half my company on one stock exchange and half on another. Right. So you got to
have to commit.
Yeah, you got to commit either side. So it's like at some point what ends up happening is they're too big and they become risk averse, right? It's kind of like the whole idea, like the challenger lives long enough to become the man, right? And so like they're a big institution. They got a CFO, they're regulated, like they've raised a lot of money, right? They got a lot of really, really important, powerful, influential investors will be super pissed off if they screw this up. And so like, imagine having that conversation. Hey, I think Tiger Global put a bunch of money in. Hey, Tiger Global, Chase Coleman. So we're going to do this token thing. Yeah, Chase Coleman, like, the
no,
fuck
you're not.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what kind of confidence does that say that these decentralization scales in that way? Does decentralization only truly work then if you just have these smaller entities and it's beneficial for everyone because of a giant Coinbase? You have isolated, atomized players, and that's ideal for society in general, that it scales up in that way.
Yeah. So I think that you just got to choose early on. Are you going to be decentralized or not? Because if you're a centralized company, the financial incentive to decentralize is not really there, right? And especially the financial incentive. Maybe there's like some other incentive. Like you look at Twitter today, like decentralization is less about finance and more about like, hey, we don't want to be making these decisions. So I think you just got to commit early. Like, hey, if you want to be a decentralized company, start out decentralized. Then you're not a company, you're a decentralized protocol or whatever, and just operate that way. But it's just if you start out centralized and you have any level of success, it becomes really hard to kind of reverse course, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, that's all of that makes perfect sense. Well, hey, Anthony, I'm super mindful of your time. Is there anything else you wanted to leave with, or what are you excited about most in the next 6 months that you would say are probably the biggest things that get you excited when you wake up in the morning?
There's not one thing, just time.
Yeah.
I keep saying just time passing. The more time
Hmm.
passes, the better off we are. So I think just letting time keep going. The more
Yeah.
time rolls, the better off we're all going to be. So just kind of letting the Lindy effect take over. What are you excited about?
Yeah, I've been courted. I'm pretty close to fully retiring, and I've been pitched by a lot of companies in the sports blockchain eco space. So I think sports industry in general is one of those industries that's very centralized, very old school, and is really ripe for technical disruption. I've spoken to a few analytics firms that are already doing that in the ways that they get players, like the Moneyball approach, things like that. But yeah, I really like the tokenization and athletes as a sweet spot for, yeah, curating media. There's the trends with nil, name, image, and likeness, and athletes really optimizing for value outside of the field. And I'm excited and passionate about helping athletes, artists, and creatives take advantage of that in a way that they previously haven't. I think a lot of the centralized ecosystems, whether it's professional athletics or agents in music industry, it's really designed to exploit and extract value from the creators and the athletes. And I would love to flip that, because I think a lot of people would pursue more creative ventures. I know myself personally, a lot of athletes would continue to play longer if they could, and if they could capitalize on a lot of the value that they're generating, not necessarily just the fixed salary that they're getting from the economics of sports across different levels. So that really excites me, like you said. And when you really put me on the spot with my confidence level of whether I would do an ICO with a Gemini or something like that, yeah, sure, there's doubts and it's a risk, but I guess it's one of those ventures that even if you fail, you're moving the dial in the right direction, right? And hopefully you fail, and you fail fast, making that reality more likely rather than less likely, and then other people can build on top of that. So yeah, that's basically where I'm at now. And what really gets me excited, if you had to, like I said, if I had to really put a number of conviction, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like when I decided to be a professional athlete, I just knew it was the right thing to try to pursue. I didn't know the odds. And a lot of people talk about this. If you do the mental model and create a calculus, you wouldn't do it. You have to be a little bit irrational. So in that way, it's a lot of intuition guiding that. But it feels right? That all these trends, decentralization, athletes and creatives capitalizing on the output that they do, it feels like it's a trend moving in the right direction. Yeah.
I tend to agree. Look, and I think one of the big takeaways here is, look, it's just experimentation leads to innovation. It's we should encourage as much experimentation as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Well, hey, Anthony, it's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Is there anywhere you want to direct some traffic or some viewers? You're all over social media. Your newsletter is great. I'm a subscriber. Where would you direct them?
Just pompletter.com. I write there every day. That's probably the most intelligent thing that I say every morning is not on Twitter. So sending them there is probably the best thing.
Yeah, actually, while I have you, what's your creative process like for that newsletter? Did you decide, hey, I'm going to do this in the same way that people put YouTube videos out? And how do you stay consistent over a 3-year period? That's very difficult to do, right?
Just wake up every day, write what I want to write. I don't even edit it, and I just hit send. That's it.
But 2 hours in the morning you write, or yeah, not even
30 to 45 minutes. And then I'm
it's
done.
the kind of thing you get better at over time, right? Because it's your general interest.
It took me way more than 30 minutes in the beginning. Sure. So just over time, you just kind of, and I, throughout the day, look, okay, that's interesting, whatever. I think about it. And then by the time I sit down to actually write, I pretty much know what I want to say. And then it's just a matter of kind of putting it down on, and actually kind of formatting it all and making sure I kind of connect the different points, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to write what you know, and if you write who you are and what you know, that compounds over time, and you'll get better and better at it, right? That's really what I tell people is the only thing you should be writing anyways, that you have an authority on. So it seems complicated and to demystify it from the outside, but when you really zoom in, it's very simple at the end of the day, isn't it?
That is, that's a great way to put it for sure.
Awesome. Well, hey, it was been a pleasure, and thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, take care.